I was interrogating a high-value target when the school principal called. Your daughter has a broken leg and 2 cracked ribs. I heard my daughter crying. A rich kid's father held me down. He said this is what happens when poor kids don't know their place, and I know you'd do anything for some money, right, sweetie? My handler took the phone. The target can wait. The jet is fueled. Go. I was on my way to teach a lesson about place. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the sterile interrogation room as I leaned back in my chair, studying the man across from me. Viktor Kozlov had been running guns through Eastern Europe for the better part of a decade, and we'd finally cornered him in Prague. 3 days of careful questioning, and I was just starting to crack his network when my phone vibrated against my chest. I ignored it. Rule number 1 in my line of work: never break character, never show weakness. The agency had spent 2 years setting up this operation, and Viktor was about to give me the names I needed. The phone buzzed again. Then again. Viktor noticed my slight glance toward my jacket pocket and smiled that cold smile I'd grown to despise. Important call, Agent Carter? Perhaps your wife wondering where you are? I kept my expression neutral, but the phone wouldn't stop. Protocol said no personal calls during active interrogation, but something felt wrong. My handler knew better than to let calls through unless it was an emergency. On the 7th buzz, I made a decision that would change everything. Excuse me for just a moment, I said to Viktor, stepping out of the room where Agent Mills was monitoring through the one-way glass. This better be life or death, Mills, I muttered, pulling out my phone. His face was grim. It's your daughter's school. They said it was urgent. My blood ran cold. Emma was supposed to be safe at Riverside Prep, the private school in Connecticut where I'd enrolled her after her mother died. It was expensive on a government salary, but I'd figured the sacrifice was worth it for the smaller classes and better security. I answered the call with shaking hands. Mr. Carter? This is Principal Harrison at Riverside Prep. I'm afraid there's been an incident involving Emma. The world seemed to tilt. What kind of incident? She's been injured, Mr. Carter. She's at Hartford General Hospital right now with a broken leg and 2 cracked ribs. I think you should come immediately. My knees nearly buckled. What happened? Was there an accident? There was a pause, then I heard a commotion in the background. A familiar voice, high and pained, broke through the phone. Daddy? Emma's voice was thick with tears and pain. Daddy, it hurts so much. Emma, baby, I'm here. What happened to you? A rich kid's father held me down, she sobbed, the words coming out in broken gasps. He said this is what happens when poor kids don't know their place, and I know you'd do anything for some money, right, sweetie? The phone nearly slipped from my hands. Someone had deliberately hurt my daughter. Someone had broken her bones and made her feel ashamed of who we were, of the sacrifices I'd made to give her opportunities. Emma, listen to me, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Daddy's coming home right now. You're going to be okay. Before I could say more, Mills had taken the phone from my numb fingers. He spoke quietly to the principal while I stood there processing what I just heard. My 12-year-old daughter had been beaten by an adult man for being poor. Mills hung up and looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before, pure sympathy. The target can wait, he said firmly. The jet is fueled. Go. I was on my way to teach a lesson about place. The flight from Prague to Hartford took 8 hours. 8 hours of replaying Emma's broken voice, 8 hours of imagining some entitled prick putting his hands on my little girl. I'd spent my career hunting down the worst humanity had to offer, but nothing had prepared me for this level of personal fury. During the flight, I made some calls. The first was to my old Army buddy Jake Morrison, who worked private security in Connecticut. The second was to Sarah Chen, a journalist who owed me a favor from when I'd helped her expose a trafficking ring in Bangkok. The third was to my lawyer, David Kowalski. By the time I landed, I had a plan. Emma was asleep when I reached her hospital room, her left leg in a cast and her small body dwarfed by the medical equipment. The sight of her bruised face nearly broke my resolve to handle this the right way. Nearly. The principal, Mrs. Harrison, was waiting in the hallway with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Mr. Carter, Principal Harrison began nervously, this is Richard Blackwood, Madison's father. Madison. That was the rich kid Emma had mentioned. Blackwood extended his hand with the kind of practiced smile politicians use. Mr. Carter, I want to apologize for this unfortunate misunderstanding. I looked at his hand but didn't take it. Misunderstanding? Well, you see, the children were having a disagreement about a school project, and things got a bit heated. Madison said your daughter was being disrespectful, claiming that money didn't matter and that her father was more important than successful businessmen like myself. I merely tried to explain that there are natural hierarchies in society. By breaking her ribs? Blackwood's smile faltered slightly. I certainly didn't intend for anyone to get hurt. I was simply trying to teach both girls a lesson about respecting their betters. Sometimes children from different backgrounds Need firmer guidance to understand social boundaries. I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. This man had hurt my daughter and felt justified in doing it. More than that, he was proud of it. I see, I said quietly. And what exactly did you tell her about knowing her place? Look, Mr. Carter, I understand you're upset. But let's be realistic here. You work for the government, probably make what, 60, 70,000 a year? I employ over 3,000 people. My company generated $400 million in revenue last year. Madison will inherit a business empire. Your daughter? Well, she'll need to learn that not everyone is equal in this world. Principal Harrison looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office. No, I said, my voice still deadly quiet. I think Mr. Blackwood has made his position very clear. He believes that wealth gives him the right to physically assault children. That my daughter deserved to be hurt because she doesn't know her place. Blackwood's mask slipped entirely. Don't try to turn this around on me. You people always play the victim. If you could actually afford to send your daughter to a proper school, maybe she'd have learned respect by now. You people? I repeated. Government workers, middle-class nobodies who think their children deserve the same opportunities as their betters. Look around, Carter. This is Riverside Prep. The median family income here is $2.8 million. Your daughter doesn't belong here, and frankly, neither do you. I nodded slowly. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Blackwood. You've been very helpful. Something in my tone made him step back slightly, but his arrogance overrode his instincts. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Now, I trust this matter is closed? I've already spoken to my lawyers about limiting my liability, and given your financial situation, I assume you'll want to settle this quietly rather than drag it through court. Oh, I won't be taking you to court, Mr. Blackwood. His smile returned. Excellent. I knew you'd be reasonable. Because court would be too merciful. The smile died. Over the next 72 hours, while Emma recovered in the hospital, I began dismantling Richard Blackwood's life piece by piece. My first call was to Jake Morrison. Within 6 hours, Jake had performed a comprehensive background check on Blackwood Industries that would have made the FBI jealous. What he found was exactly what I'd hoped for, a business empire built on cutting corners and exploiting loopholes. Blackwood Industries was a commercial construction company that had built its fortune on government contracts. The same government that employed people like me. The same government whose databases I had access to through my security clearance. It turned out that Richard Blackwood had been overcharging municipalities for public works projects for years. Worse, several of his buildings had been constructed with substandard materials while he charged for premium specifications. Schools, hospitals, and low-income housing projects had all been compromised for the sake of his profit margins. I spent Tuesday compiling a comprehensive dossier of building code violations, OSHA infractions, and fraudulent billing practices going back 7 years. All completely legal information, all properly documented through official channels. Wednesday morning, I called Sarah Chen. I have a story for you, I said. How would you like to expose a construction company that's been defrauding taxpayers and putting lives at risk? Sarah was a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist who specialized in corporate corruption. When I laid out the evidence against Blackwood Industries, she went silent for a long moment. Jesus, Marcus. This is huge. If even half of this is true, he's looking at federal charges. It's all true. I have documentation for everything. How did you get all this? Let's just say I have access to information that most people don't. And this is all legal? Every bit of it. Public records, government databases, FOIA requests that I expedited through official channels. Why are you doing this? This level of investigation takes serious resources. I looked through the hospital window at Emma, who was trying to do homework with her arm in a sling. Because someone needs to learn about consequences. Thursday morning, Sarah's expose hit the front page of the Hartford Courant and was picked up by the Associated Press by noon. The headline read, "Local construction mogul faces federal investigation for massive fraud scheme." By Thursday evening, the FBI had raided Blackwood Industries offices and frozen their accounts pending investigation. But I wasn't done. Friday morning, I implemented Phase 2. Using my contacts in various government agencies, I ensured that every single one of Blackwood's active contracts was subjected to immediate and intensive review. EPA, OSHA, Labor Department, IRS, everyone wanted a piece of the action once Sarah's story broke. The beauty of government bureaucracy is that once it starts moving, it's almost impossible to stop. Forms need to be filed, inspections need to be scheduled, assessments need to be made. Every delay costs money. Every violation carries fines. Every discrepancy requires additional documentation. Within a week, Blackwood Industries was hemorrhaging cash just trying to keep up with regulatory compliance. But the coup de grace came from an unexpected source, Madison Blackwood herself. It turned out that Richard's daughter had recorded the entire incident at school on her phone, including her father's assault on Emma and his subsequent comments about teaching poor kids their place. She'd been traumatized by what she'd witnessed and had finally worked up the courage to show the video to her mother. Mrs. Blackwood, it seemed, had not been aware of her husband's behavior. When she saw the footage of him physically attacking a 12-year-old girl, she immediately filed for divorce and custody of Madison. The video also found its way to Sarah Chen, who included it in her follow-up story about the culture of entitlement in elite private schools. Watching a grown man manhandle a child while lecturing her about knowing her place was exactly the kind of visceral evidence that turned public opinion into a mob. Within 2 weeks of that phone call in Prague, Richard Blackwood had lost his business, his reputation, his marriage, and his daughter's respect. The man who had lectured my Emma about natural hierarchies was facing federal charges that could put him in prison for 15 years. But I saved the best for last. 3 weeks after the incident, as Emma was getting her cast removed, I received a call from Blackwood himself. His voice was barely recognizable, the confident arrogance replaced by desperate pleading. "Please," he said. "I know you're behind this. I don't know how, but I know it was you. My lawyers say the investigation is airtight. The evidence is overwhelming. My wife won't return my calls. Madison won't even look at me. I'm just a government worker," I replied calmly. "What could I possibly do to someone as successful as you? Don't play games with me, Carter. I'm ruined. The business is gone, my accounts are frozen, I'm facing felony charges. What do you want?" "I want you to understand something, Mr. Blackwood. You think wealth and status make you untouchable. You think being rich gives you the right to hurt people weaker than you. But here's the thing about natural hierarchies, sometimes the person you're looking down on has resources you can't see. Your government," he said, understanding dawning in his voice. "You're not just some bureaucrat. You're intelligence." "I'm a father," I corrected. "A father whose daughter you hurt because you thought we were beneath you." "I'll do anything," he whispered. "I'll pay whatever you want. I'll make a public apology. You'll serve your time," I interrupted. "You'll face the consequences of your actions like any other criminal. And maybe, while you're in federal prison wearing the same jumpsuit as all the other inmates, you'll finally understand that place isn't determined by the size of your bank account." I hung up and looked over at Emma, who was getting her new walking cast decorated with pictures of astronauts. "Dad?" she said. "The kids at school are saying Madison's dad got arrested." "Yes, sweetheart. It turns out he was doing some very bad things with his business." "Is that why he hurt me? Because he was already a bad person?" I thought about that for a moment. "No, baby. He hurt you because he thought he was better than us. But it turns out that the only thing that makes someone truly better is how they treat others, especially people who can't fight back." Emma nodded solemnly. "So what happened to him happened because he was mean to kids?" "In a way, yes. Sometimes when people do bad things, it catches up with them." "Like justice?" "Exactly, justice." 6 months later, Richard Blackwood was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, tax evasion, and racketeering. His business empire was completely dismantled, with victims of his construction fraud receiving settlements from the liquidation. Madison Blackwood, now living with her mother under her maiden name, wrote Emma a letter apologizing for what her father had done. She'd been accepted to a public school in a different district where she was reportedly thriving without the pressure of her father's expectations. Emma returned to Riverside Prep, but the dynamics had changed completely. Word had spread about what had happened to the Blackwood family, and the culture of entitlement that had pervaded the school began to shift. Parents who had previously flaunted their wealth became more conscious of how their attitudes affected their children. As for me, I returned to Prague to finish my interrogation of Viktor Kozlov. The arms dealer was so rattled by my extended absence and obvious calm that he broke within hours, giving us everything we needed to roll up his entire network. My handler never asked what had happened during those 3 weeks I was stateside. He didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves. People always ask me if I feel bad about destroying Richard Blackwood's life. The answer is simple. I feel exactly as bad as he felt when he broke my daughter's ribs and told her she needed to know her place. The difference is, I actually knew mine. I was a father first, and everything else second. And any parent who threatens my child will quickly discover that wealth, status, and privilege mean nothing compared to the determination of someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Richard Blackwood thought he was teaching my daughter a lesson about place. Instead, he learned one himself. There's no higher place in this world than being loved by your child, and no lower place than losing that love through your own cruelty. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's getting even, legally and completely. And sometimes, just sometimes, the system actually works exactly the way it's supposed to. But the story doesn't end there. 2 years later, I was sitting in my office at Langley when Jake Morrison called with an update I hadn't expected. "Marcus, you're going to want to hear this," he said. "Remember that piece of poop Blackwood? Hard to forget him. What about it? He's been writing letters from prison. Lots of them. To Emma." My blood went cold. "What kind of letters?" "Love letters, man. Obsessive crap. He's fixated on her, blames her for ruining his life. The prison mail system flagged them as inappropriate before they reached her, but there's a whole stack of them. My contact at the facility says he talks about her constantly, calls her the little miss who destroyed everything. I was already reaching for my coat. Send me everything you have. Within an hour, I was reading through 15 handwritten letters that made my skin crawl. Blackwood had spent his time in federal prison constructing elaborate fantasies about Emma, detailing what he would do to her when he got out. He'd somehow obtained information about her new school, her friends, even her after-school activities. The letters revealed a man who had completely snapped. Instead of accepting responsibility for his crimes, he'd focused all his rage on a now 14-year-old girl who had done nothing but exist as his victim. But what really chilled me was the final letter, dated just a week ago. I've been good, little Emma. Model prisoner. I'll be eligible for parole in 3 years instead of 10. And I know exactly where to find you. Your daddy thinks he's so smart, but he can't protect you forever. And when I get out, I'm going to finish what I started. You need to learn your place once and for all. I immediately called David Kowalski, my lawyer. David, I need to know about prison communications. If an inmate is writing threatening letters to a minor, what are my options? Threatening a minor from prison? That's a federal crime in itself. We could have his sentence extended significantly. Do you have copies of these letters? I'll have them to you within the hour. Good. I'll file a restraining order and petition for additional charges. This idiot just added years to his sentence. But even as I made the legal moves, I knew they weren't enough. Blackwood was obsessed, and obsessed men find ways around legal barriers. I needed a more permanent solution. That evening, I had dinner with Emma at our favorite restaurant in Georgetown. She'd grown into a confident, articulate teenager who spoke fluent French and was already being recruited by Ivy League schools for her academic achievements. The scared little girl in the hospital bed was gone, replaced by someone strong and self-assured. "Dad, you seem distracted," she said over dessert. "Is everything okay?" I studied her face, looking for any sign that she might have received unwanted contact, but she seemed genuinely unaware. The prison system had done its job intercepting the letters. "Emma, I need to ask you something important. Have you noticed anyone following you? Anyone trying to contact you that seems unusual?" Her eyebrows furrowed. "This is about that man who hurt me, isn't it? Mr. Blackwood?" I'd never hidden the truth from her about what had happened to him, though I'd been careful about the details of my involvement. "He's been writing letters from prison. Inappropriate letters. They never reached you because the mail system caught them, but I wanted you to be aware." Emma was quiet for a long moment, then looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of her mother's strength. "Daddy, I'm not afraid of him anymore. I was 12 when he hurt me, and I didn't understand what kind of person would do that to a child. But I understand now. He's weak. Weak people hurt others to feel strong, but it never works because they're still weak inside. You're absolutely right, sweetheart. But weak people can still be dangerous. I know. But I also know that I have the best father in the world, and anyone who threatens me has to deal with you first." Her trust in me was both heartwarming and terrifying. She had no idea what I was actually capable of, and I intended to keep it that way. The next morning, I made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Tommy Castellano, a friend from my Army days who had chosen a very different career path after his discharge. Tommy worked in what he euphemistically called private conflict resolution, the kind of work that involved no paperwork and left no traces. "Marcus Carter," Tommy said when he answered. "I heard through the grapevine you were making life difficult for rich assholes. Good for you, brother." "I need a consultation, Tommy. Personal matter." "Say no more." "Same place as always?" 20 minutes. We met at a dive bar in Arlington where the drinks were cheap and the background noise made surveillance difficult. Tommy looked the same as he had 15 years ago, built like a brick wall and twice as dangerous. "So what's the situation?" he asked after we'd ordered. I told him about Blackwood, the letters, the obsession. Tommy listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "This piece of poop is fixated on your daughter?" "Completely. He blames her for destroying his life instead of taking responsibility for his own crimes. And he's got 3 years left on his sentence? With good behavior. But here's the thing, Tommy, I can't do anything that might come back to Emma. She trusts the system, trusts that justice works. If something were to happen to Blackwood, it has to look completely natural." Tommy nodded slowly. "I understand. You want him to have an accident. I want him to never be a threat to my daughter again. Prison accidents happen all the time. Especially to guys who hurt kids. Inmates don't like child abusers, and sometimes that dislike gets physical. Can you make it happen?" "Not directly. But I know people who know people. The kind of people who are already inside the federal system and have their own reasons for disliking scumbags like Blackwood." "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "These things take time to set up properly. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Depends on when the right opportunity presents itself." "And the cost?" Tommy waved dismissively. Brother, after what you did for me in Kandahar, you don't owe me anything. This one's on the house. I shook his hand, knowing I was crossing a line I'd never crossed before. But Emma's safety was worth more than my moral boundaries. 8 months later, I was in Berlin tracking a terrorist cell when Jake called with news. Blackwood's dead, he said without preamble. What happened? Prison fight. Apparently, he made the mistake of bragging to his cellmate about what he was going to do to a 14-year-old girl when he got out. Word got around the prison, and someone decided to shut him up permanently. Who? Guy named Rodriguez, doing life for murder. Broke Blackwood's neck with his bare hands during rec time. Said later that anyone who threatens children deserves what they get. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Any connection to me? None. Rodriguez has been inside for 12 years, no outside contacts that would link back to you. Prison records show Blackwood had been getting increasingly aggressive and unstable. The guards had filed multiple incident reports. It was just a matter of time before someone shut him up. When I got home from Berlin, I found Emma in her room studying for her SATs. She looked up when I knocked on her doorframe. How was your trip? She asked. Productive. Emma, I have some news. Richard Blackwood died in prison last week. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. How do you feel about that? It was such a mature question, the kind her mother might have asked. I feel like a threat to you has been eliminated, I said honestly. Good, she said simply. I'm glad he can't hurt anyone else. That was Emma, no fake sympathy, no pretending to mourn someone who had terrorized her. Just practical acceptance that the world was safer without him. 3 years later, Emma graduated valedictorian from Riverside Prep and was accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship. At her graduation party, several parents approached me to thank me for what had happened to the Blackwood family. The whole culture of the school changed after that, said Mrs. Patterson, whose son had been in Emma's class. Parents stopped trying to use their wealth to intimidate other families. The kids are happier, more collaborative. It's like everyone learned that money doesn't make you untouchable. Principal Harrison, who had tried to protect Blackwood initially, pulled me aside near the end of the evening. Mr. Carter, I owe you an apology, she said. I should have protected Emma from the beginning instead of trying to manage the situation diplomatically. What that man did was unforgivable, and I'm glad justice was served. Thank you, Mrs. Harrison. I hope it never happens to another child. It won't. Not on my watch. We've implemented new policies about parent interactions with students, and we have mandatory training for all staff about recognizing and reporting abuse. The Blackwood incident changed everything here. As I watched Emma give her valedictorian speech about the importance of standing up for those who can't defend themselves, I realized that what had started as revenge had become something larger. Emma's courage in the face of bullying, and the subsequent consequences for her attacker, had created ripple effects that protected other children. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. Sometimes it's about making sure the cycle ends with you. Richard Blackwood thought he was teaching my daughter about her place in the world. Instead, he learned that some lessons come with permanent consequences, and some fathers will go to any lengths to protect their children. Emma never knew about the letters, never knew about Tommy Castellano, never knew that her father had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. She believed that justice had been served through the legal system, and in a way, it had. But sometimes, when the legal system isn't enough, there are other systems in place. Systems run by fathers who love their daughters more than they fear the consequences of protecting them.